Hi, I am Lois, your friend for forgiveness from Walking Without Skin. I use the acronym SMILE to describe what I do. I'm a speaker and storyteller, a mentor, an inspirer, a learning facilitator, and an empowering coach. But today I am representing Motivate Magazine. It's Motivate Magazine. It's an online and a hard copy business magazine. You've got to get hold of this magazine. It really is great. There's so much information in there. So visit motivatemagazine.com and get your copy now. And today I have the absolute pleasure of talking to Felicity Pryke. Hi, Felicity.
Hi, Lois.
How are you doing today?
I'm good, thank you. How are you?
Great, thank you. We're going to be talking about Felicity's article in the Motivate magazine called Zoom Yoga is Here to Stay. But before we get to that, tell me, Felicity, how do you do yoga on Zoom?
Well, it's very easy, really. I mean, when we went into lockdown last year, it seemed quite obvious to me. So I'd been with business coaches. I'd already used Zoom for business coaching and things like that and meetings. And it just felt quite natural that when we couldn't be in person, that we could very easily teach people yoga online. Because practically everyone's got a device of some sort that they can use, and it's actually really nice to be able to do yoga in your own home, I think, as well. And this is why I wrote the article that I think some people will want to go back to in person, and a lot of people have wanted to go back to in person, but I think a lot of people embrace this idea that they can just do it in their own home. And especially if I've got a late night class, they can go straight to bed. They don't have to worry about driving home or anything afterwards.
So I'm a complete novice. I've never done yoga before. What would you tell me? How would I start?
So this is where doing it online is really useful as well, because we can start really gently, and you can be very aware of yourself. So yoga is very much about your own experience of what you're doing. It doesn't have to be much jumping around. Quite often I'll demonstrate to people, right, let's just sit here and just take a moment and just turn your head from side to side, slowly and gently. And just be aware of the sensations in your neck and how that feels. And then I just kind of say, there you go, you've just done some yoga. It's as easy as that. And I think sometimes when we're in classes and we're seeing lots of other people, it starts to feel a bit competitive. You're a bit like, well, if they can do this, if they can get their leg up around their head, then I must be able to do it. And that's not right for everyone. Yoga can be really, really gentle, and it's about the way that I teach yoga. It's about trying to find new ways of moving the body that feels good. So if you, as you're turning your head from side to side, you're like, this really hurts every time I do this. You learn, well, that's not the best way to do it. So maybe there's a different angle, maybe there's a different way of doing it, maybe a different speed works better. So learning these new ways of moving, and that's what I think online. I have one teacher, my yoga teacher, she teaches practically completely verbally. So she doesn't demonstrate very much at all. And she'll basically look at the screen, command people verbally and just watch them. So it's not about copying what other people are doing at all. It's not about copying a shape that someone is doing. It's about how it feels in your own body.
So what happens is now, especially as a novice, I get pretty flexible and I manage to get my leg behind my neck and I get stuck and there's no one to help me. What do I do?
Well, this is where you should be working within your own capabilities at all times. So it's in my T's and C's, and when people sign up to my classes, what you do with your body in your home is your responsibility. You shouldn't be, yoga is not about putting yourself in positions that you can't get yourself out of as well. So if you're getting to a point you're thinking, do you know what, if I go any further, I'm stuck. It is that whole listening to your own body. And if you get to a point where you're stuck, then you haven't done that listening bit. So ideally you want a teacher who encourages you to find your limits and not go beyond them.
In your
I can't get my head around. I can't get my leg around my head, by the way, and I've been doing yoga 20 years. So,
in your article, you show a woman looking at her computer while she's exercising. Is that what you actually do?
I do. So I do demonstrate quite a lot in my teaching myself, just because that's my style, is to demonstrate quite a bit. So it does help to be able to see a screen. But I've had people come into my classes just using a phone, so they're not going to see a very big thing of me. It's just getting an idea of what's going on. And sometimes, you have to look behind you or something to see your screen, but you have that in a class anyway. You're not always in a class, you're not always in a position where you can see the teacher very clearly. So I don't think there's any difference between doing it online or doing it. And actually, I think sometimes, especially when people have got a small mobile device that they can easily move, they'll just move it around the room, depending on what pose we're doing and which direction they're facing.
So you said that one of the advantages is that you can just go straight to bed. You don't have to drive home. Why? What other reasons do you say that make Zoom a permanent feature in our lives for yoga?
Well, I think going along those lines, that's a time saver for people. It's not just a case of wanting to go straight to bed, but that's a real time saver for people. Even if your yoga class is only a 15-minute drive away, that's half an hour out of your life every time you want to go to a yoga class. And yes, some people really benefit from that, from going outside of their homes. And when I wrote that article, I'm not negating the benefits of in-person yoga, I'm just saying that Zoom yoga does have benefits as well. So I've got to try and remember now, because I should have brought the article up to look at while I was here. I did just have a scan over it. The time benefits and the money saving benefits as well for student and for teacher as well. So as a teacher, this was one of the difficult things I was finding. I was a newly qualified teacher when lockdown happened, and you hire out a hall and you have to pay for the hall regardless of how many people turn up. And you, as a teacher, you have that extra time of going out to the hall. You pay for your advertising or your flyer or whatever, and you go there ready to teach, and then only one person turns up, and you've still got to pay for the hall, even though only one person has turned up. When I'm doing this at home, I actually, because I've got a pre-booking, I know if people are coming or not. If no one turns up, I crack on with my day. I mean, it's much easier from a teaching point of view. It saves me time, saves me money, and it saves my students time and money as well. What else did I put? You're going to have to refresh my memory, sorry.
You spoke about a variety. You can try different teachers.
Yes. Yeah. So, I mean, this has been a fantastic thing. In my hometown, we have quite a lot of yoga teachers. We have quite a bit of variety, but a lot of places you don't. You might only have one yoga teacher in your town, which means if you want to do yoga, you have to go to that yoga teacher. If that's not really the style that suits you, or if the personality doesn't suit you, I went through loads of yoga teachers before I found my yoga teacher. And with doing it online, you've got a smorgasbord of yoga there for you. You know, you've got all these different teachers, different personalities, different styles, different speeds, different levels. You know, if you want to do jumping around yoga, there's plenty of jumping around yoga. If you want to do get your leg behind your head yoga, there's plenty of that. If you want to do spending most of your time lying down yoga, which is kind of more my style, then there's plenty of that as well. You know, there's a lot of diversity, and I think it's opened up yoga to a lot more people that way. And like I say, sometimes it can just come down to the personality of the teacher. If your local yoga teacher, you just don't like their voice, then you're a bit stuck, aren't you? Whereas now you can try any yoga teacher in the world, and that's lovely as a teacher as well. You know, I've had students from all over the world come to my classes, and it's a bit daunting when you've got students from India in your yoga class.
Why is it daunting?
Stepping on cultural toes, but it's wonderful as well.
So what about the community? You know, I know a lot of my friends who do yoga, they enjoy, come on, let's go together and have a cup of coffee afterwards. What about the community?
There is that element to in person, which is really lovely. And the idea of getting out of the house and having that routine of leaving the house to go to a yoga class is really beneficial for people as well. I have, and I know many other people have formulated their online communities. So using Facebook is a really obvious example. Facebook groups are made for this sort of stuff. You can just lob all your students into one Facebook group, and then you've got a bit more cross-pollination as well. So it's not just the people on your Wednesday night yoga class that are together, they get to mingle with people from all of your yoga classes, and again, students from around the world. So creating a bit more of a global community and you know, creating a slightly larger community, I guess, as well, rather than just keeping people together in their classes.
So felicity means happiness. How do you combine happiness with yoga?
So this is my kind of big baby, really. I call myself the yoga and happiness teacher. And my classes are not just yoga. So we do some yoga at the beginning, we do some relaxation into our yoga, we do a bit of breathing and some meditation, and then we talk about subjects to do with happiness. And I became quite obsessed with the idea of happiness, obviously because of the name, and I did an online course called The Science of Happiness. It's a Yale University online course, and I kind of came to the conclusion that a lot of the things I was learning in that were echoing what I'd learned as a yoga teacher trainer. So things like neurology, this is the science bit, concentrate sort of thing. I use a lot of stuff to do with neurology and the nervous system in both camps. So in yoga, as I said, we're looking for new ways of moving the body. And quite often this comes from neural pathways. It's about teaching our muscles new ways of moving rather than, you know, and that's all in the nervous system. And I always visualize it as like a pathway in a jungle. So if you're walking through a jungle or a forest or something, there's a defined pathway, there's an open pathway, and that's the way everyone walks because that's the path that's there. But maybe that pathway, and that's how your brain works, and that's how your body works. Your brain automatically connects things. You have these neural pathways in your brain that say, when this happens, do this. Keeps our brains running quite fast. But unfortunately, sometimes those pathways don't lead us to the place where we want them to lead. And the same with the body, same with our jungle. Sometimes maybe the path keeps taking us over there and we actually want to go over there. So we have to start to create new pathways. And much like in the jungle, the first time you go that new pathway, you've got to get the machete out. And it's quite hard work getting down that new pathway. And then the next time it might still be a bit overgrown. You've still got to work at it. You've still got to keep going, be very consciously going down that road. Same with our brains and our bodies. So I always use the example of, imagine I'm not going to name names, but imagine there's a certain politician and every time they come on the TV, you're like, I hate this person. Well, that's not really a very productive way to react to someone who comes on the TV. Or if every time they come on the TV, you want to throw something at the TV. That's not a very good thing to have for your brain to automatically think. So the first time you want to not react like that, you want to create the space to just respond as a more rational human being. It's really hard not to react like that. But eventually, that new pathway of I'm not going to react with, I'm going to react with, something a bit milder, perhaps. So first few times, it's going to be really hard to take that new pathway. But eventually, that becomes your normal path. Eventually that becomes your new thought process or your new body movement process. And much like in the jungle, eventually that becomes the path you always take, and the old path starts to get overgrown and you no longer go down that path. So the neuroscience behind both, I just found really, really fascinating. This idea we can retrain our bodies and we can retrain our brains to be happier and more content and more comfortable. So that was the main thing that was like a light bulb, that these two things operate in the same way. And then there's lots of things in like yoga sutras about trying to be happier is not necessarily the right word. And happy is a difficult thing on its own because lots of people have different concepts of what happiness is. We kind of talk about whole happiness and a deeper sense of happiness as well, not just ecstatic joy, but finding meaning and purpose in life as well, and being content, and finding that kind of more placid version of happiness rather than peaks and troughs. And it's also, I think my big thing at the moment is trying to help people to find a life that they don't need to escape from. Do this in all the teachings. They go on monthly themes. So this month we're talking about wanting and miswanting. It's a concept that we're not very good at knowing what we want, which is why we tend to go for the things that don't make us happy in the long term. And then we talk about subjects like gratitude, labouring, compassion, stress and anxiety. So every month has a new theme.
Oh, fantastic. And I love the title of your webpage, Finding Felicity. Tell me about that.
Well, it just came, I couldn't even tell you what it was. One of those flashes of inspiration, really. I did find out afterwards, I think someone else somewhere has written a book with the same name, a fiction book with the same name. Or so it's not entirely unique, but just with the name and this idea of finding your happiness, that's what that's all pertaining to, really.
Oh, fantastic. So we can find our happiness in our thoughts and in our bodies, and we can do it when we go finding felicity.
Yeah. I mean, with the body, it's as much about finding comfort and contentment, and also not being defined by our bodies as well. This is another one of the things that go on about quite a bit, that you are not your body. Your body is yours, but you are not your body. And a lot of people define themselves by their bodies, don't they? By their abilities or disabilities, by their medical complaints. I don't know if anyone quite goes this far, but when you introduce yourself to someone say, "Hi, I'm Joe Bloggs and I'm an asthmatic." So people really define themselves by what medical complaints they have, don't they? But trying to separate that, create some space between you and your body. And that actually, to me, makes me want to look after the body more, because I think this is like the vehicle that carries me around. And if my body's not working properly, then I can't do the things that I want to do. if you're not healthy in your body, you may die earlier. And so, you know, all those things that you want to do when you find your meaning and purpose, you're shortening your time frame to try and do that. If you're not physically comfortable, or you know, if you're physically less able to do things, you're limiting your ability to help other people. If you're not sleeping properly, you're then mentally depriving yourself and less able to help yourself and other people as well. So this is kind of where the body links into making ourselves happier in a lot of ways.
So can you give me one final technique that I can do while we're sitting here talking?
I should have saved the neck thing for here, shouldn't I? Oh goodness, one thing, what can we do? Well, I'm going to go completely curveball. I'm going to talk about something completely different to what I've already talked about, which actually kind of comes away from my article in a little bit. So last month we talked all about connecting, and we talked about connecting to nature, connecting to yourself, connecting to friends and family, but also connecting to strangers. And this has been one of the most powerful lessons I've learned over the last few years, is how to connect to strangers, or being more open to connecting to strangers, because we think we wouldn't enjoy talking to a random stranger on a train or something like that. But there's studies that asked people to do this, and they actually really enjoyed it, and the people who they talked to really enjoyed it as well. So being more open to connecting to strangers, I think that's a really nice thing to think about now as we're moving out of lockdowns, as we're starting to see people more, even if it's just a really brief exchange. So not feeling like just because you talk to someone, you have to build a lifelong relationship with them. You can just say to someone in the supermarket, oh, I really like those sausages. or I think one person I said, pointed out to them that something was cheaper somewhere else in the store. Or saying to a stranger on a train, I really like your shoes. And then they just go off and say, wow, someone really likes my shoes. And that's all you need to do, just those really small connections. That's what I'm going to leave you with today, which I know is total curveball compared to everything else, but that's kind of come in my head.
That's great, because it is part of happiness, and it fits in with your yoga, so that's perfect. So thank you very much. You can find Felicity on findingfelicity.com.
.co.uk, not .com, .co.uk.
Oh, sorry, .co.uk. And please go out, read her article in the latest edition of Motivate Magazine, motivatemagazine.com. And everybody, go out there, be happy, and get your body flexible and free. Thank you very much for joining us, Felicity.
Thank you.
Farewell. Bye.